the way Alex did.
Were you saddened by his troubles and you know, ultimately his sort of fall from grace, obviously by his illness, but were you saddened by the way things turned out with the sport for him?
Well, yeah, I suppose you'd have to do it towards the end in some of his interviews and that, but he was a very proud player and probably found it difficult to take when he couldn't compete as well as he had done previously. And you know, towards the end of his career, yeah, it was a bit sad to see some of the interviews and that, but you know, you can't take it away from him. I would tend to remember him when he first came on the scene, and as I say, we had all sorts of run-ins together, but a lot of players have had that with Alex, and I've had some terrific battles against him, and in his hometown in Belfast, you know, we've played for the Irish title there on numerous occasions, and there was some, you know, moments to be savoured and moments I'll not forget.
And just finally, Dennis, if I may, I mean, we talk often about characters in sport and how maybe there aren't quite so many of them around anymore. Do you think we're likely to see the like of him in snooker again?
No, I don't think you see the like of Alex in any sport. As I say, he was unique. There was just something about the way he played the game, and he was there was a little bit of McEnroe in there. You know, there was always going to be a little bit of controversy if he could get the referee going a little bit. He seemed to be able to play it better if he caused a little bit of havoc sometimes. But that was Alex, and you know, that, as I said, made him unique. And I don't think you'll ever see another player in the game of snooker like the great Alex Higgins.
Now, some news that's been developing in the past half hour. We have pictures.
BBC News would like to draw your attention to the fact that you can watch BBC News live online at bbc.co.uk/news.
As it progresses. So,
BBC News, whenever you need to know.
Who are you? What do you do?
What do you think?
I'd say private detective.
When the police are out of their depth, they consult me.
This is my friend, John Watson.
Friend. Colleague.
The name's Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street.
Sherlock, Sunday at 9 on BBC One.
"17 people have died after a stampede at a music festival in Germany. Up to 100 others were injured in the crush inside a tunnel.
Embassy World Snooker Champion.
Alex Hurricane Higgins, snooker's flawed genius, has died at the age of 61. 2 American soldiers are missing in Afghanistan, feared kidnapped by Taliban insurgents. And Gordon Brown returns to the international stage in Africa. He tells the BBC he hasn't retired and still wants to make a difference. Good evening. At least 17 people have been killed and up to 100 injured during a crush at a music festival in Germany. The victims were making their way to the Love Parade festival in Duisburg when they became trapped in a tunnel. Festival goers have spoken of the chaos and mass panic as they tried to escape. Richard Slee has the latest.
This amateur video footage shows the chaotic scenes at the entrance to the tunnel shortly after the stampede and the crush began. Revellers are desperately trying to get away, many being pulled up and away from danger. Others look confused, unsure about what's unfolding. Rescue workers struggle to get past the crowds, to the hundreds of people still trapped and injured inside the tunnel. These pictures show the crowds moving through the tunnel earlier this afternoon. The initial panic is thought to have started when the police tried to stop people getting into the site because they feared it was getting overcrowded. This festival goer says people were being sent back through the tunnel towards people still entering it. They walked into each other and there was panic as nobody moved forwards or backwards. The tunnel leads to an old disused railway yard where the festival was taking place. Some reports say 1.4 million people were trying to get into the site that could only hold 300,000. Soon a major rescue operation was underway. The nearby motorway was closed and fleets of ambulances and helicopters were standing by. The festival wasn't immediately cancelled because the authorities feared that could spark a second panic and more chaos. The Love Parade is one of the biggest music festivals in Europe, but at recent events there have been concerns about the size of the venues.
It's kind of been really quite up and down in terms of numbers, over the course of its history. It's ranged between sort of 300,000 or 400,000 people and in excess of 1 million people, which presents huge crowd control problems because if you simply don't know how many people are going to turn up, it's very difficult to anticipate how many police to put on, how many crash barriers, etc. Obviously, none of us know the reasons, but it's a big issue where something's free.
A few hours after the crush, people were still leaving the site. Many didn't realise what had happened. This festival had been famous for its happy and peaceful atmosphere, a reputation now replaced by tragedy. Richard Slee, BBC News.
Alex Hurricane Higgins, the former world snooker champion, has died today at the age of 61. He'd been suffering from throat cancer. Alex Higgins' fast and furious style with a cue was the trademark of his golden years during the 70s and 80s before his career struck troubled times. Joe Wilson looks back at his life.
Alex Higgins was snooker's first television superstar. He brought drama to the game, but his success was often overshadowed by self-destructive behaviour. Higgins grew up in Belfast, part of a working-class Protestant family. By the age of 11, he was hustling at the Jam Pot, a snooker hall where he developed his speed around the table, which later earned him the nickname Hurricane. In 1972, Higgins entered the World Championship for the first time and won. Beating John Spencer in the final, Higgins was just 22, then the youngest ever champion. 10 years later, he won again, beating Ray Reardon in the final. Unforgettably overcome in his moment of triumph, Higgins gave snooker its emotion. But there was a dark side to his character. 2 failed marriages, drink problems near bankruptcy, and numerous charges of unprofessional behaviour, including headbutting an official. Inevitably, his form suffered. In 1990, he lost in the first round of the World Championship and announced he was turning his back on snooker.
I'm not playing snooker anymore because this game is the most corrupt game in the world.
Dennis Taylor first met Higgins in the very earliest days of his career and has no doubt that snooker will remember him kindly.
It's a very sad day because he did a lot for the game, Alex, when he come on the scene and played the game totally different to anybody he'd ever seen before, and lifting that world title in 1972, he stamped his authority on the game of snooker.
Higgins' latter years were ones of sad decline as he became seriously ill with throat cancer. But his fans will remember the Hurricane in his prime, one of the men who created snooker's mass appeal, who played the game like no one else did and no one else will.
Henry holds out his hand. Alex is the champion.
Alex Higgins, who died earlier today. Now, a huge search and rescue operation is underway for 2 American soldiers who are thought to have been captured by the Taliban in Afghanistan. The men are believed to have been seized in Logar province, south of Kabul. A reward of $20,000 has been offered. Our diplomatic correspondent, Bridget Kendall, has this report.
Scrambling to respond to incoming fire, US soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division defending their outpost near Kandahar. In other attacks in the south today, 5 Americans were killed, 4 in a single blast, the bloodiest month for foreign forces in Afghanistan since they arrived 9 years ago. And now a new and devastating blow. 2 American servicemen feared kidnapped by the Taliban. NATO officials say they drove out of their compound in Kabul on Friday. It's thought they went south to Logar province, where, according to local Afghan officials, they got caught in a firefight with the Taliban after being